Let me begin with two caveats, pitfalls that I think we should be careful to avoid. It's very important to have this meeting about Gaza, one of the most disgraceful situations in the world. But we should remember that it's only in U.S. and Israeli policy that Gaza is separated from the West Bank. They're a unity, one unit, what's left of Palestine, 22% of the original mandate. Now, it's very important for the U.S. and Israel to separate the two and isolate them. For one thing, that means if there ever is some kind of a political settlement, the West Bank will be deprived of any access to the outside world. It will be imprisoned. It won't have a seaport. It'll essentially be contained by two enemies. So there is a strategic reason for the long-standing and intense effort to distinguish Gaza and the West Bank, to keep them apart, to ban transport, and also kind of ideologically to make them seem as if they're two different places. They aren't outside of U.S.-Israeli ideology, and we should be careful not to resist that, I think. Another division that I think it's important to resist is between U.S. and Israel. Now, we constantly talk, rightly, about Israeli crimes, but that's highly misleading because they are U.S.-Israeli crimes. There's nothing that Israel does that goes beyond what the United States authorizes and, in fact, directly supports with economic, diplomatic, military, and also ideological support, that is, by framing issues. So these are U.S.-Israeli crimes. If we talk about Israel, we should remember we're talking about ourselves. It's not like talking about crimes of China. These are very important to keep in mind. Now, turning to Gaza and the West Bank, the separation of Gaza and the West Bank is part of a much more general policy, a policy of fragmentation of the residue of Palestine so that it cannot hope to emerge as a viable entity. Separating Gaza from the West Bank is one part of it. Gaza, as Nancy pointed out, has been converted into a prison. The screws are being steadily tightened so that it becomes a maximum security prison, something like Guantanamo. It's kind of a little odd on the side that there's been so much horror in the United States about Guantanamo. It's not very different from the maximum security prisons that the United States runs, and we're unique in the world, in the Western world, in having an incarceration system of this kind. So it's not just becoming a prison, it's becoming something like a maximum security prison, which is basically a torture chamber. It's under constant siege, a very harsh and brutal siege. A siege is an act of war. Of all countries in the world, Israel surely is unusual in recognizing that. It twice launched a war, 56 and 67, on the grounds that its access to the outside world was very partially restricted. That was considered a crime, and total siege is, of course, a much greater crime. So it's a major war crime that we're carrying out. Whatever a state does, there's a pretext, security. Whatever you do, it's in self-defense, kind of by definition. And as usual, in this case, the pretext doesn't stand up to a moment's scrutiny. So take, say, the annexation wall. I mean, if the reason that's offered is defense, security. I mean, if the concern were security, we know exactly what would be done. The wall would be built on the international border. It could be made impregnable, patrolled on both sides, a mile high, totally secure, and that would give security. But, of course, if the purpose is what it actually is, namely to steal land and resources, then it can't be built on the international border, where it might furthermore inconvenience Israelis instead of just inconveniencing and, in fact, stealing from Palestinians. And the same is true of the attack on Gaza. It's almost universally accepted here, and in the West generally, that Israel had a right of self-defense and therefore was justified in attacking Gaza, even though the attack was maybe disproportionate. That's accepted, for example, by the Goldstone Report. The Goldstone Report is a very valuable account of the atrocities that were carried out in the course of the war, but they're regarded as disproportionate actions in a legitimate war of self-defense. Well, if you think about it for a minute, there is indeed a right of self-defense. Sure, everyone agrees to that. But there is no right of self-defense by force. Now, that has to be argued. And there's extensive international law and just common sense on this. You do not have the right to use force in self-defense unless you have exhausted peaceful means. Well, in this case, there definitely were peaceful means. The U.S. and Israel knew it, and they chose not to even attempt them because they wanted a war. They wanted to attack. The peaceful means were obvious, again, not controversial. There had been a ceasefire initiated the preceding June 2008. Israel concedes officially that during the ceasefire there was not a single Hamas rocket fired. Sderot was quiet. The ceasefire was broken on November 4th when, using the cover of the U.S. election, Israel invaded the Gaza Strip, killed half a dozen Hamas activists, and then rockets started firing. In the following month, Hamas offered repeatedly to reinstate the ceasefire. Israel acknowledged it. Cabinet discussed it, decided not to accept it. So the attack itself was a criminal act. The U.S. and Israel are guilty of outright aggression. And if they fired one bullet, it was a crime. And if they carried out the atrocities that they did, it was a crime. And if you look case by case, there's virtually no justification for the claim of security.